How's it going, folks? I'm Matthew. This is Lemora's Cards, and as I like to say, today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going over a big cEDH tournament that had over 100 players that you probably never even heard about. Today I'm talking about God of Commander 6, which is an event that took place in Japan that had 122 people, and we're going to be looking at their really spicy top 8. So we're using MTG top 8. They break down from top 8 instead of top 16, because that's the way the website works, and those are the decks we're gonna look at. And these might be a little bit more difficult to parse through because there's gonna be some interesting spice here. So it might take us a little bit to get through each of them. So maybe doing 8 instead of 16 will be helpful. Anyways, I think you're gonna find stuff that you really like here. There's a lot of really cool stuff to get into, and I'm super excited to be covering events like in Japan and Brazil. And if you have any specific events that you know of in another region you'd like to see talk about on a video, let me know. If you enjoy this video, like, comment, subscribe, consider supporting me on Patreon. You get cool stuff like merch, discounts, access to early videos like this, all that good stuff, and new stuff will be coming over there soon, I promise. All that being said, let's get into the video. Looking to run a great cEDH event? Having hosted over 100 successful tournaments, Eminence Gaming has your back with Command Tower. With its intuitive tournament manager dashboard, you can handle everything from deck list submission to player management in just a few clicks. Then, all players need to do is scan a generated QR code to have access to your full tournament bracket. Put your players first with seamless pairing software and real-time access to standings. Take the guesswork out of tournaments. Give Command Tower a try for your next event. So up first, we are looking at Thada Adel Acquisitor. This is a commander that has got a little bit of talk, even in the events you might have heard about. It really takes advantage of the ubiquity of cards like the One Ring, or just the One Ring, but also other broken artifacts. If you're at a pod with tables that aren't on the One Ring, the card still functions. You can still get somebody's mana crypt, things like that. But the big thing this deck is built to do is use and abuse the One Ring. So we have cards like Manamo, which have been very popular since the printing of the One Ring. Decks that are utilizing it like Kennen. Phyrexian Metamorph, of course, is a way to copy an opponent's the One Ring. Commander itself, like we mentioned, we have Hullbreaker Horror and Tidespout Tyrant. You might notice this commander doesn't have anything to do with infinite mana, but what this deck can do is generate infinite mana and then take advantage of infinite ETBs or things like casting the One Ring, drawing a card off of it, bouncing it, drawing your entire deck to get to your win con. This deck is really leaning into it. You have a lot of the Twiddle type effects, like Twiddle itself is here, as well as cards like Dream's Grip, Vizier of Tumbling Sands, which you might be familiar of with in like the Lotus Field type decks. And it is really here to break the One Ring. There's also a really strong control package built around it, including some cards you might not be used to. Stifle, which makes its way into some US cEDH decks. Disrupting Shoal, pretty interesting one. More free removal, although it is pretty niche in terms of what it can hit. But I mean, cEDH, there's a ton of 0, 1s, and 2s. Dramatic Reversal, again, can just be a big old ritual. Can be an awesome way to take advantage of all your Twiddle effects. Foil, more free interaction. Lots of free interaction, even stuff that you may not be used to seeing. And then we have some extra turn stuff like Nexus of Fate, which can also be a win con, take infinite turns once you've drawn most of your deck. And then we see just other extra turns effects. Really valuing those highly. Does work really well with the One Ring and also with the commander, maybe being able to go through multiple combats and take multiple artifacts. Some other powerful artifacts this deck is using. The keys, of course, great when you're focusing on the One Ring. Rowan Drain, a big new one that is stupendous card in monocolored decks. A little on the expensive side, but it's 5 mana rock that taps for 4. It's pretty cracked. And then can also draw cards. So again, this is another outlet with your Hullbreaker or Tidespout, being able to draw through your entire deck. Pretty nifty. Mind Over Matter, another combo outlet. There's, I'm sure, a lot of overlapping ways to combo between the keys, cards like Tezzeret grabbing you things, stuff you can get off the commander, all the tapping and untapping stuff. There's surely a ton of different ways you can combo with this deck, and you have a really overlapping thing. And you do have infinite mana outlet in the form of Walking Ballista. And yes, it's really cool to see a deck with a sort of linear focus. We've seen again US based tournaments have this commander show up, and then also like decks like Vargoth, which are very focused on doing one thing, actually show up and do well. So it's really cool to see that. And of course, when you got some of the best draw engines and the best pieces of interaction behind it, can really help out. So very cool list. Let's get to the next one. Next, we are looking at Rowan, Scion of War. This is one a lot of people were hyped about that we haven't seen a lot of results of. There's people trying it, but it is very much, you know, it does what the card does. It's a very focused storm outlet, or a storm enabler rather. So we're running a dragon package. Oh yeah. One thing that might stick out to you immediately is all these weird dragons that are here. It might make it look like this is a casual list. We've got Goldspan Dragon, Terror of the Peaks, Null Spine Dragon, Hoarding Broodlord, which, you know, sees more cEDH play, Cavern Horde Dragon. What's going on here? And that's because this deck is a Dragonstorm list. If you're not familiar, Dragonstorm, if you weren't playing Standard back, you know, around when I was born, search your library for a dragon, put it into play, then shuffle your library, and it has Storm. So this card allows you to set up ridiculous board state and be able to combo off by getting all these dragons into play, grabbing combo pieces with Hoarding Broodlord. I'm assuming pretty much anytime that spell resolves, it ends in a win, especially considering, you know, the big downside of that card is the massive mana cost. 8 in a red is a lot, but Rowan reducing all the rituals that you cast, getting up to it, your Cabal ritual, your Desperate rituals, all those being reduced. And then also the Dragonstorm itself potentially being reduced by the entire 8 and being 1 red, get 3 or 4 dragons from your deck and put them into play. Really powerful stuff that you can do. So we see a lot of the kind of typical Rowan specific cards, Priest of Gix, Gut Shot, Dismember doing double duty here, Sonhalf operating as a strong card with Dockside and things like that, but also goes crazy with Hoarding Broodlord, lets you do a very slick, easy combo with that card. Skeletal Scrying is a interesting one that allows you to either use it as an enabler to turn on Rowan, you know, pay mana into it to lose life, or probably better, using it after you've already used Rowan and getting a huge discount and getting a big influx of cards, you know, maybe taking like 7 damage or something, draw 7, lose 7, pretty good rate for 1 mana. Cards like Past in Flames, very focused storm package. I'm still just in love with the Dragonstorm. This deck not choosing to try to do things with Ad Nauseam or Bolas' Citadel, which some variants of this deck have. It is choosing to do Wraith the Flux Reservoir, Underworld Breach, and a really cool one, Return the Past. This is sort of a new Past in Flames variant, Return the Past. As long as it's your turn, each instant sorcery in your graveyard has flashback. Its flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. Such a cool focused storm deck that is really trying to take advantage of what Rowan offers in a really unique way. Lots of utility lands that are able to deal damage to you or let you pay damage. I'm still not really that sure about the Frenzied Goblin. I don't understand that one. I guess just a way to help make sure our stuff gets through. I don't know. If you understand the Frenzied Goblin, let me know. If you look at this deck list, all these deck lists will be in the description, so let me know if you can understand that one a little bit better than I do. But all in all, super cool deck. I'd love to give this one a try and see how it does over here. On to the next one. And we've got another low color, very fast deck in the form of Crick, Son of Yawgmoth. You probably know this one pretty well from over here in the States. Notable cards. We're doing a lot of the kind of typical Crick stuff. We have cards like Asmodeus, which is really cool. Balthor the Defiled, which lines up with a lot of cool combo options. Sheoldred, Necrotic Ooze. A lot of the traditional Crick cards, trying to see if there's anything super notable. Beseech the Mirror, probably the most busted card that's ever been printed for Crick. Stocks went way up on this one as soon as it was shown. And yeah, we're just seeing a lot of ways to cheat mana, generate mana, spend mana for life, winning with some of the Crick lines to be able to loop creatures like Grey Merchant potentially, or also on Hoarding Broodlord, super cool card as well. And it lines up pretty well with the amount of reanimation stuff that you're doing, also using Sonhalf. So in a way, kind of similar to the last deck. Of course, Crick and Rowan are kind of like super amazing together and have a sort of similar function. Yeah, it is really cool to see these sort of like really dedicated, let's just go burr decks doing well over here. This one a little bit less to say. There's nothing quite as absurd as Dragonstorm, which you almost never see in US cEDH, but man, another just really cool deck that is just trying to go proactive and make your opponents have it and just go fast. Next up, we have Derevi, Imperial Tactician, a commander that has seen, you know, that was at one point a really popular sort of Staxy option, like Derevi kind of stasis sort of decks, untapping stuff to, you know, not affect yourself, but now not so popular in the general cEDH meta. And let's see what we have here. So we've got Cloud of Fairies, sort of typical stuff you'd expect. Blighted Halfling, Esper Sentinel, Drannith, Scheming Fence, which is a nice piece of hate that can also take advantage of your opponent's stuff. This is another card that got a lot better with the One Ring. When it enters the battlefield, Choose a non-land permanent. Activated abilities of the chosen permanent can't be activated, and Scheming Fence gets those activated abilities, which is pretty nice. Running Kinnan. A lot of these kind of decks are. Now we're getting into, so Flesh Duplicate, another cool card. Now we're getting into the more spicy stuff. So got Eldrazi Displacer. Works pretty well with Derevi. One cool thing you can do with Derevi is if you're able to like double up its ETBs, which we'll see there's a lot of stuff here, you're able to tap and untap cards like Cradle or some of your other lands that are permanents that produce mana like Bloom Tender. We see Eldrazi Displacer here to do this. Feldar Guardian, having Flicker combo, Emil being able to potentially do this. Preston the Vanisher, another interesting option. So one piece of synergy Preston has with Derevi is Preston triggers if the creature wasn't cast, and if you use Derevi's ability to put it directly onto the battlefield from the command zone, that will trigger it. You won't get 2 Derevis, but you will get both of the ETBs, so which is a nice like piece of extra synergy. And then if you're able to flicker, of course, do any of that, then Preston will double up on all your flickers. Notably, they did not include a card that you might expect in a list like this, and that is Displacer Kitten. So no Displacer Kitten. Cards like Stunt Double, which is pretty cool. We are in a very clone heavy meta. Lots of cards that can take advantage of getting through combat, making sure that there's no blockers in your way. Grazilix being sort of like a Tymna effect. Tedeus, which is the Dalsim equivalent from the Street Fighter thing. Toski, Orin Frostfang. And then big old top end cards. Teferi, which is a big flash enabler. Archon of Valor's Reach, just locking out a total card type. Choosing this on instant, pretty busted. And then a really interesting one is Torsten, founder of Benalia. When it enters the battlefield, until the top 7 cards of your library, put any number of creature and or land cards from among them into your hand. And then when it dies, you make 7 1/1s. I mean, this is a way, if you flicker it, to get through your deck. It also makes you a whole lot of dudes if you have a way to kill it and do stuff with it. I'm gonna be real, this is a little bit of a strange addition here, but maybe it's powerful. We have Wargate, very cool flexible tutor, Court of Calling, Veil of Summer, Tezzeret the Seeker, Vivian, Champion of the Wilds, which is another cool one that enables you to do a lot of flash stuff with your creatures. Birthing Pod and Monster Manual. Monster Manual especially is sick. Just put a creature into play from your hand. This thing, you get this thing out, it's gonna be really hard to deal with. Spice Film we talked about last time, last March of the Ints. Uncounterable, draw a bunch of cards, put a bunch of creatures into play. Very strong if you get to resolve it. And I mean, really the issue is just having the mana for it. Resolving it should be pretty simple since it can't be countered and it takes like a mind break trap to stop it. Deafening Silence, so a little bit, just the tiniest bit of stacks. This is a far cry from the Derevi kind of Winter Orb stasis kind of nonsense. Just a Deafening Silence, and this is such a creature heavy deck. Makes a lot of sense. Really leaning in on the flicker win cons and doing infinite mana, infinite ETBs, drawing your deck and going crazy and beating people down a lot of the way it looks like. Really cool. Able to use Finale to turn that infinite mana that you can generate into a win pretty easily. Pretty interesting list. Cool, kind of grindy, toolboxy-ish list. I like seeing something like Spell Queller show up and Flesh Duplicate, Fairy Mastermind, Ghostly Pilferer, which is not seeing nearly as much play over here in the US for a little bit. Pretty cool list. Now we got Tivit, Cellar of Secrets. This one you might know pretty well. Let's see if there's any Japanese spice here. So the mana base, other than, you know, Manamo, again, pretty decent for the One Ring. You can even untap Tivit with it. We have Talion the Kindly Lord, which has become just a staple in these sort of slower Esper Shell lists. Urza Lord High Artificer, good card here. Hullbreaker Horror, which is a card some of the Tivit decks choose to run. I'm not really sure. It doesn't seem like a lot of the successful ones, at least over here, tend to run it. Needing to generate infinite Esper mana can be something that isn't just guaranteed in a deck like this. The idea of Hullbreaker Horror in the deck being that you can bounce, recast your rocks and netting infinite mana and keep casting and bouncing and recasting Tivit. Once you can do the Tivit one time, you're pretty much good because you're going to be able to get 2 mana of any color anyways. To filter in that mana, but you do need to be able to get the colors at least to be able to cast Tivit. Stubborn Denial, this is a card we've seen in decks like Narset and Niv Mizzet. You got a big old commander, this makes your counterspell a lot better, and oftentimes this just works as a counterspell. Sometimes Force Spike is just enough. We've got Trick Bind, which is a card a lot of the, especially the Dimir sort of control lists like to run, having split second. Makes it really hard to interact with. Word of Invention, way to get your time sieve. Imposter Mech, again, another card that we've seen a little bit more play of. A really powerful thing that we've seen a lot of with Imposter Mech is it's able to just copy a Bowmaster and be a Bowmaster that doesn't die to Bowmaster, which is one of the best traits your Orcish Bowmasters can have. For the most part, though, this is a pretty typical Tivit shell, kind of like what we've seen. There are some cards that, like, you know, there are cards that you might not see in every list. Of course, there's some liberties taken. A card like Urza Saga is pretty cool to see. Inventor's Fair being an extra tutor in the Lancelot. For the most part, I mean, this is probably 90% of the way similar to most of the Tivit lists that you might see in a US tournament. Notably though, not really running any sort of hate pieces. This is not trying to do the Blind Obedience, Sheoldred, any of that kind of stuff of being on the stacks to your side. And this is just a pretty straight up control list that can also just power out a Tivit early. You still got the Dark Rituals, the Mana Vaults, etc. So yeah, this is more focused on just the Tivit game plan, and it seemed to do pretty well getting them to top 4 of this event. Next up, we got Kenrith the Return King. This is one of the most flexible commanders in all of cEDH, so let's see what they did with it. Right off the bat, I see Emerge Zone and Phyrexian Tower. That means things are happening. Cradle usually a pretty common option here. Let's see, we've got Bird, Skirk Prospector, common with Kenrith. If you're not familiar, there are dockside reanimation loops that get easier with Skirk Prospector. You can also do similar things with Phantasmal Image and Mayhem Devil. That is why these cards are all here for the most part, other than just, I mean, dockside and Phantasmal Image are just good cards anyways. Also seeing Ghostly Pilfer, so maybe there's just a little bit of the throwback meta over there. Maybe some of those cards are just doing well. So it's all looking normal now, and then we scroll down and we get this jump scare of CMC that make a Nas player throw up. So we have Zur the Enchanter. Okay. We have Dragon Lord Dromoka, which you might not be as familiar with. This is kind of just a big old uncounterable Grand Abolisher. Rograkh the Unbowed, which you probably know of, you know, deal 6 to you if you cast a non-creature spell. And then Atraxa Grand Unifier, Palancron, Emrakul. So I'm guessing before scrolling down, this is just really leaning into the sort of reanimation ability of Kenrith and looking to do broken stuff with that. That's really cool. That's cool. Palancron, of course, is a combo enabler. Not a super popular one in cEDH, but does enable some combos. See if we can figure out more of what's going on if we go down below. Force of Vigor. Thada, also leaning into that sort of value from the graveyard that you might expect. Not typically in a Kenrith deck list, but good, I guess. Really interesting. Okay, now some things are getting figured out. Okay, so we got Monster Manual again. So maybe the Japanese players are a little bit higher on this ability to just dump a creature into play whenever you want. Survival of the Fittest, which just shows up in Kenrith decks, and here is just a little bit better, I guess. City of Solitude, really leaning in on these Grand Abolisher effects. This one is even stronger than Grand Abolisher. People can't cast spells or activate abilities, period. Not restricting card types, whatever. You're not doing any channel nonsense. Nothing's happening on my turn. And then Sneak Attack. So Sneak Attack is really, really interesting because it lets you put in Zur with haste, which is really good. Dragon Lord Dromoka, don't care so much about haste. Rograkh, Atraxa, and Palancron as just ways to get a combo started. And then Emrakul. Is Emrakul just here as a 13/13? I mean, you could get it cheap enough to cast for sure, but if you could do that, you could probably just win. It doesn't work with Sneak Attack, really. I don't know. What do you think? Is the Emrakul just here for value? Is it really here just to take people's turns and, you know, really be incredibly disruptive? Doesn't seem like that would make a lot of sense. I'm really not that sure about the Emrakul. But the Sneak Attack, City of Solitude, Monster Manual stuff, this is like really sick. Really cool deck list. That's kind of like a wild pile take on Kenrith. Really interesting stuff to see, and really cool that a deck like this got top 4. Now, this second place list looks like Japan may have had to marty some of their own because we got Rograkh and Tymna. Iganjo, interesting one to see. All right, so we have lots of good Tymna cards. Gold Town, not one you see over here too much. Goblin Banneret, Hope of Girapur, Ragavan, or Confidant. Not that many creatures at the 2 and 3 drop slot, which we've seen really get glutted up, especially in a lot of Tymna decks. Kind of just choosing to run the better ones. Loyal Apprentice, good enabler for Tymna. Bowmasters, of course. Bergy, great for storming. We see Orm's Chant, which a lot of the Mardu lists over here are on. Soul Partition. Reign of Filth, which you don't always see, but is a great way and was like a super popular staple, even in decks like Blue Farm not too long ago, to just really help those Nas turns. or help you push through whatever you need to push through. Tybalt's Trickery, which is a bit of interaction we don't always see, but sometimes shows up. Infernal Plunge, of course, great card with Rograkh. Grape Shot being a way to win with what I'm assuming is a Cloudstone loop somewhere around here. No. So we've got the Grape Shot, but there's no Cloudstone loop. We do have Skull Clamp, which is nice. Guild Artisan, which we've seen become more popular. Underworld Breach. Is there a way to deterministically win with Grape Shot? What the frick is this? Active. Oh, okay. So rewinding a little bit. Let's have Active Volcano. Destroy target blue permanent or return target island to owner's hand. Really packing the blue hate over here. And it is 1 mana get rid of Aristic Study, which is pretty nice. The Grape Shot is an interesting choice that I'm guessing is here mainly as a flexible sort of during your storm turn removal option, potentially a way to win. I'm not seeing a deterministic loop to be able to infinitely Grape Shot to make sure it always wins if you have a certain set of criteria. Maybe I'm missing that, but it looks like it's just not here. Yeah, I guess let me know if you see a way that Grape Shot is a deterministic win, or maybe it's just here to potentially like kill a player, just get rid of like a super flexible kind of like Fire Covenant almost effect to just ping out a bunch of dudes. I don't know, but really cool to see. I really like the Mardu decks. I'm a big fan of Roger. Really cool, powerful stuff, and it got it to a second place finish here at this event. And last but certainly not least, of course, even in Japan, the best deck is Blue Farm. They are on the Cavern Souls tech. Let's see what else we've got. Spire of Industry, Tarnished Citadel, really valuing their mana. Deep Gnome Terramancer, which is a card that not a lot of Blue Farm palettes opt to run. This is basically being ran instead of something like an Archivist of Ogma. If you're not familiar with it, essentially its main purpose in cEDH is that whenever somebody plays a fetch land, you get to go get a plains out of your deck, which can be pretty nice. It can be like 2 mana, permanently make a lot of mana that's hard to interact with, because fetch lands are such a critical part of all cEDH mana bases. Opting to run Fairy Mastermind, Ledger Shredder, which is a card that has fallen a little bit out of favor, but still running here. Loyal Apprentice, Orcish Bowmasters, kind of typical creature suite. Oh, right, let's see, any more spice. Reign of Filth, again, showing to be kind of popular over there. In some ways, it almost seems like their meta is, I don't know if I want to say behind, but it is reminiscent of like 2020, 2021 card evaluation. Again, Limdul is Vault, a card we don't see as much of, but again, I wouldn't want to say that they're behind. It may just be that they're going back to these cards that people have written off and saying like, wow, no, these are really good right now. Cabal Ritual, any craziness. We got Dam, which is kind of popular even over here. So Jessica's Will is an interesting one because this isn't really a card you see ran in Blue Farm much nowadays, but it can be incredibly powerful. Definitely don't want to sleep on it, especially when it's in a deck with cards like Underworld Breach, where the card gets absolutely absurd. And again, if you're casting your commander pretty reliably, you know, if your Tymna deck is casting Tymna early on, Jessica's Will is probably going to be one of the better cards in your deck to draw at that point. And there's not too much other spice here. We have, I mean, they're valuing some cards over others, but nothing too crazy. Deep Gnome Terramancer being the only card I really don't see that often. Reign of Filth again, and Limdul's Vault being kind of throwback cards. Justice's Will not being too popular choice, but for the most part, you have a standard-ish Blue Farm deck taking down tournaments in Japan. Yeah, turns out the best deck is maybe the best deck everywhere. But these events in Japan tend to happen pretty regularly, and I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, maybe Blue Farm doesn't even show up in the top 8 of the next one. And if you'd like for me to cover the next big event that happens in Japan or Brazil or Europe or wherever, let me know down below. What did you think of these decks? Deck list again will be in the description. There's really good stuff. You can check out this website I'm using here, mtgtop8.com, is a great resource to check out events that aren't being housed on Command Tower software and aren't on EDH Top 16. Definitely feel free to go check those out. Give it a look. And maybe you'll find something that you like that you hadn't thought of playing and you didn't think it was viable. I mean, I would definitely not look at events that aren't in the US and say that they don't count. I think that's kind of silly. This is an event where 122 people showed up and they all tried to win it. And these are the decks that crawled its way to the top. These are the decks that did well. And there must be something to that performance. They have access to all the same cards that we do. And the Japanese players, you know, especially in traditional tournament Magic, have been really on top of things and really been leading the way in terms of how they approach deck building, and had to have, us US players and European players kind of catch up in some ways at certain points. If you enjoyed this, let me know down below what you like, what you didn't. Let me know what you want me to do different next time and what you want me to cover. All that being said, and with huge thanks to all my patrons over on Patreon, thank you for watching. Go have a good one.